Well, I'm joined by Alf Cannan, our Chief Minister of the Man. We're recording this just hours after the UK have had their, well, it wasn't a mini budget at all, was it? It was a phenomenal amount of stuff. I know I'm talking to your Treasury Minister, but I want to talk to you about cost of living as well as that. So I don't know which order you want to play these in. I mean, cost of living, first of all, because of the fact that we're in such incredibly challenging times. I mean, you just come out of COVID and come into this one. It must be horrendous, right?
Well, we are in challenging times, Paul, but we, I believe, have set out a very strong platform to help the island get through this winter. And Tim Mulder proved that yesterday. I think it was a good debate, but the base case that we set out around electricity pricing, the universal impact of that, I think, will give businesses and individuals a strong fighting chance to get themselves through this winter. And I know a lot of people are also struggling with the gas pricing as well. But on top of that, that's why we have brought through this additional support and have indeed paid already one tranche of additional support to our families and those on very low incomes. We're going to do that again in October and again in December. So 3 tranches of quite significant cheques of £300 essentially going out to families and to those on low incomes, and alongside the freezing of electricity prices, and of course the other measures which may or may not help people, including the £2 bus fare cap, which we'll introduce from November. So it's a strong package, it's a substantial package, it gives a very good foundation, it will help people, and alongside that we will also continue to pay very close attention to the data that we are receiving and determine from that whether there is any further specific interventions that we will bring.
How is it hitting our reserves, though? I mean, we just, I say, come out of the COVID thing. This is probably the last thing you can imagine when you're just hoping to start building up reserves. How are we being hit? How bad is it going to be to Isle of Man PLC?
Well, I think we need to wait for the budget in February.
Your budget?
For the Treasury Minister's budget in February, and we will obviously get proper look both at the impact in terms of this year's forecasts versus what's actually happening, and we'll also take a look at what things are going to look like into next year and into the future. But it has been quite a difficult 3 years. It's forecast that with direct and indirect costs have impacted on fiscally on the Isle of Man government to the tune of £300 million, certainly an estimated £150 million in direct support had been given out to businesses and individuals. And now we are continuing to dig into the pot, if you like, in terms of all the additional support that we're given, and now £26 million, albeit in a loan to the MUA. Nevertheless, this is not the sort of...
Can you explain that one? Because we're paying for it in the long term, right?
This is not... You can't just carry on with these sort of behaviours endlessly. Now, we've made a considered decision in this instance to get us through to next March and to buy us time to see what happens in the Ukraine particularly and whether there have been any further impact on energy prices. But of course, we're not just sitting still as well. We've now progressed our active policies around 20 megawatts of renewable energy to be generated on island. We've clearly got our sustainable energy plans for the long term for the island. So we're going to push ahead and try and get as much of this in place as quickly as we can. But that still won't help us necessarily in the very short term. So that's all about government's actions, it's about communities' actions, and it's about individual actions that will help get us through this very difficult period.
Explain, though, this loan, at the end of the day, the MU, you're not just giving it back to the public because you're making it a loan to them, which we will then, as electricity users, pay back over the years or generations. I don't know what it's going to be. Is that the right way of doing it? I
think, and certainly in the short term, I think it's important that we get the economy through this next stage. I mean, we're under huge pressure, as we know, from COVID. I accept there's a lot of businesses, small domestic businesses who have faced a tough COVID period and now got an additional period of tough trading conditions to face as their prices are being pushed up and potentially domestic spending is being reduced as a result of these energy costs. But yes, certainly in the short term, I think it's the right way to do it. We need to be very careful, though, that we don't end up exhausting ourselves, putting so much debt into the onto the balance sheet, if you like, at this point, so that future generations, or in 5 or 6 years' time, we really don't have anything to fall back on in future events. So we need to be, and I think this will happen. We'll take a very close. Keep a very close eye on the situation. It's almost inevitable that electricity prices, will have to rise on the Isle of Man from the 1st of April. But to the extent of that and in what shape and form that takes will very much depend on what happens to wholesale gas and energy prices over the next 6 months.
So if I've got this right, we make the electricity by burning gas.
Correct.
We haven't got no control over the gas price. So the more you kind of push people into using electricity, the more the bills, your bills, or our bills back on to the MU must get worse, won't they? Because the gas is being turned even more.
There are some risks here. I mean, I think one, you can't sustain this. So if there's an expectation level that we're going to freeze prices for 2 years, you're going to be looking at bills of 60, 70 million pounds that will need to be lent effectively to the MUA, and that's clearly not healthy to suppress pricing like that, no matter how tough it is on individuals and businesses at that particular time, because just building more and more debt for the future, and you have to strike the right balance when it comes to these things. But yes, it's there are risks certainly with the strategic approach that we're taking, but we think it's the right approach over this short-term period. And if the economy comes through this well, if we can sustain people and keep businesses going, because we've managed to retain some effectively of this discretionary spend, as we call it, in terms of people coming out to spend in the high street or in the leisure facilities, then I think we will have a very good chance of providing that platform to take us through into next summer. So
electricity is fixed, but do we as a nation need to think about the use of that electricity? Do we not have so many Christmas lights outside the houses, or turn the hot tubs off, or anything that might just be less lighting? I
don't say just because we've frozen the electricity prices that all the pressure has been reduced on individuals. We know that food prices are increasing. We know that costs are increasing in a number of other areas. Fuel costs, for example, although they've come down a bit recently, and there's every chance possibly that they'll start to rise again over the winter period. So people are seeing the impacts of that in their daily lives anyway. And what we will be doing is encouraging people to reduce their supply and consumption of energy where possible. We're doing that certainly by strengthening the energy advice that will be on offer particularly from the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture. And we will work with the community to make sure that communities and charitable organisations themselves are in a position to be able to give people that advice in terms of how they can go about saving energy. And yes, so I do say to the public, there is a risk if just because electricity prices are frozen, if everybody sort of takes that as a signal to switch on, keep the electric going, then of course they are adding a cost burden onto the future stability in terms of the debt that's owed.
Do you lead by example? I mean, talk about government here. I mean, do you turn off the lights on the wedding cake now and not cancel Christmas, but turn all the heating a bit down? All those things that you hear about that Germans are doing, they're turning off all sorts, aren't they, over there?
Yeah, we're currently reviewing energy use in government. We're actually determining right now what that policy should look like in terms of our advice to government departments and into everybody who's in charge of facilities, across the government estate, if you like. So yes, it's very important that we lead the way and set the right examples.
You're making quite clear here that this 6 month is only 6 months. I mean, this is not going to be paid after that. You may review it, right, but it's unlikely to stay at that level if things are still going even higher.
Yeah, no, I think there's every chance that electricity prices will rise, but our job will be then to make sure that we are working with the MUA to consider how best to bring across price rises that will be considerate and will help the economy. So one would like to see that sort of thing being staged. But Paul, I don't want to get too far ahead of the game because whilst we continue, it's a very fast-moving situation. You can see, arguably in Ukraine, I mean the ball game is changing again now very much in terms of what Russia is trying to do in annexing the parts that they are continuing to hold in Ukraine and the associated threats that they are then going to make if they claim that as now effectively part of Russia, and what that will mean for the dynamics of how the war's perceived both in Russia but also in the West. So, yeah, as I said, we've provided a strong platform. Our job will be to stay on top of that now, understand what's happening internationally, looking at wholesale prices, obviously, but also it's very important that we retain our understanding of our own economy performance-wise and also on the impact on individuals. And
just, as I said, hopefully speaking to the Treasury Minister this weekend, but just your overall thoughts on the mini-budget, or the budget that the UK government came out today. They didn't touch VAT, of course, but otherwise it seems to be hitting all the things that we normally excel at, should we say? They're going with the lower tax and all these sort of things. Well, are you worried?
Well, it's only an hour and a half or so since that's been delivered, Paul, and I haven't really had a chance to analyse it. I've had a quick glance at the headlines. But they're going to be a low-cost economy, you want to always taxation. Yeah, until I've really seen all the details, it's very hard for me to sit here and comment. I'm sure you'll understand in an hour and a half.
But it's the last thing you need, probably.
Well, I can see it's clearly. Obviously the analysts are saying the biggest tax cuts in a budget since 1972, but obviously that. Within a couple of years, things hadn't gone so well, and there was still incredibly high inflation, etc. So, and I think we need to be careful because the level of borrowing in the UK now is at record levels. We don't operate the same sort of fiscal structures, if you like, but in that context. So I need to be careful that we don't knee-jerk or get knocked off course, because I think there is a case for calm heads at the moment. We have the lowest unemployment figures here on the island since the early 2000s.
Almost too low, isn't it?
300 people unemployed, 800 vacancies or so across the island. So actually, things are relatively stable in terms of the jobs front and the opportunities that are here for. People. The issue actually lies very much in terms of costs and wages, and we set out in our island plan that we were going to help raise living standards, take everybody up to living wages. We're already made some progress in terms of how we've raised the minimum wage up quite significantly now in the last round of that wage assessment, and we're going to fulfil that commitment, take that up to the living wage benchmark. Albeit, arguably, that self brings additional pressures. But nevertheless, it's important we try and raise living standards, important we try and raise wages.
Extra people.
Then, we need to be obviously focused into the future as well, given that we've recognised there are a number of current risks facing us.